I'm 57, and my doctor told me to stop walking. This 5-minute daily workout changed my entire life. When Dr. Morrison walked into the exam room after reviewing my stress test and gait analysis, I expected the usual advice. You know, the generic stuff you hear about getting your steps in, walking more, moving your body. Instead, he said something that stopped me cold. He said, "Grant, I need you to stop walking long distances. Not for a week, not to rest an injury." He said I needed to replace my walking routine with something entirely different. And this is what I want to talk to you about today, because what happened next transformed not just my physiology, but the entire way I think about maintenance training at this stage of life. Now you have to understand, I'd been walking 4 to 5 miles a day, thought I was doing everything right. Get my steps in, keep the cardiovascular system moving, stay consistent. Sounds reasonable on the surface. But here's where the science gets interesting and a little bit uncomfortable if you're someone who's been relying on walking as your primary form of exercise. Morrison explained that for men in their 50s and beyond, especially men with any history of joint stress or metabolic dysfunction, long-distance walking can actually trigger a counterproductive pattern. He pulled up my cortisol panels, my HRV data, and said the excessive steady-state walking was keeping my nervous system in a mild state of chronic stress. Not the good stress that builds adaptation, the bad kind, the kind that taxes recovery and can actually accelerate aging markers. What he suggested instead was a specific 5-minute protocol I could do daily, not occasionally, daily, built around 4 foundational movements that would deliver everything I needed without the systemic cost of high-volume walking. And I know that sounds like too little, too simple, but let me walk you through exactly what's in this 5-minute sequence and why the science actually backs it up completely. The first movement is what I call the loaded step-up. You need a step or platform about 12 to 14 inches high. A sturdy bench works perfectly. You're going to hold a dumbbell in each hand, and you step up deliberately, with control. Lead with your right leg. Drive through the heel. Stand fully upright at the top. That's 1 rep. Step down with control. Alternate legs. What you're doing here is activating your largest muscle groups in a way that walking never touches. Your glutes, your quadriceps, your hamstrings, your stabilizer muscles. You're creating mechanical tension, which is what actually builds strength at our age, not volume. Tension. Morrison had me do 20 reps of these, 10 per leg. I started with 20-pound dumbbells and now I use 35s. 2 minutes total with brief rest. The neural demand is high, which means your nervous system gets the signal to adapt. The metabolic cost is substantial, which means you're getting cardiovascular benefit without the repetitive impact. The second movement is what I call the single leg deadlift hold. You're going to stand on one leg, holding a dumbbell or kettlebell at your side, and you're going to hinge at the hip while extending your free leg behind you for balance. Not explosive, controlled, slow. You hold that position for 5 seconds. Return to standing. That's the whole movement. Your standing leg is working intensely. Your stabilizers are firing. Your proprioceptors are engaged. You're teaching your nervous system how to maintain balance and control under load, which is exactly what prevents falls in real life. A study in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research showed that single-leg balance work reduced fall risk in men over 50 by 42%, compared to men who did no specific balance training. 42%. That matters. I do 10 of these per side, 20 total, about 90 seconds. The third component is a loaded carry. This is where it gets really interesting metabolically. You take a heavy dumbbell or kettlebell, you hold it at your side with your arm at a 90-degree angle, and you simply walk with it. But you're walking for time or distance at a specific intensity, not just casually strolling. You're holding your core tight, you're not rotating, you're walking with purpose. The beauty of the loaded carry is that it trains your nervous system to manage heavy load while moving, which translates directly to real-world resilience. Your grip strength increases dramatically. Your core stability improves. Your posture improves because your back extensors are working to support the load. I do 2 30-second carries, 15 seconds per side, then rest for 30 seconds. That's about 90 seconds total. But here's the key, and this is what Morrison emphasized repeatedly. It's not about distance. It's about the quality of the loading and the intensity of the nervous system demand. The fourth and final movement is what I call the tempo squat hold. You're going to do a goblet squat, holding a dumbbell at your chest, and you're going to move slowly and deliberately. Down for 3 seconds, hold at the bottom for 2 seconds, up for 3 seconds. You're not trying to do high reps here. You're accumulating time under tension. You're teaching your legs how to move through a full range of motion under load in a way that walking never does. Morrison said that the squat is the most functional leg movement we have because it mirrors the movement pattern of standing up from a chair, climbing stairs, and moving through the world. I do 8 to 10 slow, controlled reps, about 60 seconds. So let me put this all together. 5 minutes. Loaded step-ups, 2 minutes. Single leg deadlift holds, 90 seconds. Loaded carries, 90 seconds. Tempo squats, 60 seconds. Total accumulated stimulus without the systemic stress of 5 miles of walking. And here's where Morrison really got my attention with the data. He had me track 3 specific metrics over the 8 weeks after I switched my routine. First was my morning HRV, which is heart rate variability. It measures nervous system recovery. After 2 weeks of the 5-minute protocol, my HRV increased by 8 points on average. That's significant. That means my nervous system was recovering better. My resting heart rate dropped from 62 beats per minute to 54, and my cortisol levels, which had been elevated, normalized to optimal range. Second metric was my leg strength, measured by 1 RM back squat. I went from a 195-pound 1 RM to 240 in 2 months, 45 pounds in 8 weeks. That doesn't happen unless you're training smart. Third metric was knee and hip pain, which had been a nagging issue. It went from a 4 out of 10 on most days to basically 0. The reason this works is surprisingly simple when you understand the physiology. Walking is a low-demand, high-volume activity. Your muscles aren't being challenged to adapt. Your nervous system isn't getting a signal to build anything, but your joints are accumulating repetitive stress. At a certain point, especially if you're doing multiple miles a day, you're just degrading the cartilage without building resilience. This 5-minute protocol flips that paradigm. It's high stimulus, low volume, and it builds actual strength, which is what truly protects your joints. Strong muscles surrounding a joint are what stabilize that joint and reduce wear. Walking doesn't build strength, it builds endurance, which is fine if that's your goal. But if your goal is to maintain mobility, strength, and resilience at 57, it's not the most efficient path. Now, Morrison also talked about the hormonal piece. This style of training, characterized by what researchers call metabolic resistance training, triggers a specific hormonal response. You get a temporary elevation in growth hormone and testosterone in the hours after training. Not a huge spike, but enough to signal adaptation. Your body's building capacity, not just burning calories. This is something walking, especially low-intensity walking, doesn't trigger. You could walk for an hour and your hormonal environment stays relatively flat. Do this 5-minute protocol, and you've created a training stimulus that your body responds to by building strength and maintaining muscle. The progression is straightforward. You're not trying to set personal records. You're trying to gradually increase the load or the difficulty of the movement every 2 to 3 weeks. When you're doing loaded step-ups with 20-pound dumbbells, and that starts to feel easy, you go to 25s. When single-leg deadlift holds feel stable, you add slight rotation or increase the hold duration. The loaded carry, you increase the weight or the distance. The tempo squats, you might add a second rep or increase the load. Small increments. Consistent progression. That's how you adapt without getting injured. Now I want to talk about why this works at a cellular level, because understanding the mechanism helps you stay committed to the protocol. When you perform heavy resistance exercise, you create micro tears in your muscle fibers. Your body responds to that stimulus by activating something called muscle protein synthesis. Over the next 24 to 48 hours, your body is actively building new muscle protein to repair and adapt to the stress. This process requires adequate amino acids from your diet and adequate recovery. Morrison was very specific about the fact that the training stimulus is only half the equation. The other half is recovery, nutrition, and sleep. If you're training hard but not eating enough protein, not sleeping enough, or not managing stress, you won't see results. He had me tracking my sleep, my protein intake, and my stress levels simultaneously with my training. That comprehensive approach is what created the transformation. Morrison also talked about something called hormonal optimization. He said that men in their 50s often have suboptimal testosterone levels. The combination of chronic stress from excessive walking plus inadequate strength training stimulus was actually suppressing my testosterone production. By switching to resistance-based training, I was creating a stimulus that increases testosterone production temporarily after training. Over time, with consistent training, your baseline testosterone improves. This has systemic effects: better mood, better energy, better recovery, better body composition. He actually measured my testosterone at the start, at 8 weeks, and at 16 weeks. It increased by about 15% in just 16 weeks. Not to levels that required medical intervention, just a natural improvement in response to training stimulus. I've been doing this for almost 3 years now. The initial change was profound, and honestly, I was skeptical at first. I'd been told my whole life that walking was health and walking was good, and I should walk more. Learning that the specific context of my body, my age, my physiology, meant a different approach was the right one was humbling. But the data doesn't lie. I'm stronger at 57 than I was at 47. My joint pain is gone. My metabolic health is excellent. My stress levels are lower despite the higher intensity training because my nervous system is recovering more effectively. One thing I didn't expect was how quickly my work capacity improved. Work capacity is essentially your ability to do physical work and recover from it. It's measured by how much volume you can handle, how quickly you can recover, and how consistently you can perform. In the first 4 weeks of this protocol, my work capacity dropped because my nervous system was adapting to a new type of training. But by week 6, it started climbing. By week 12, I could do significantly more training volume and recover faster than I could before switching from walking. This is because resistance training creates a different kind of adaptation. You're not just training your muscles, you're training your nervous system to recruit muscle fibers more efficiently. You're improving neuromuscular coordination. You're creating metabolic flexibility so your body can switch between different energy systems more effectively. Walking doesn't do this. Walking, especially at moderate intensities, trains a very narrow metabolic pathway. Resistance training trains multiple pathways simultaneously. This isn't to say walking is bad. Walking is wonderful for mobility, for mental health, for getting outside. I still walk, just not long distances. I walk for 15 or 20 minutes a few times a week. But my primary training stimulus comes from this 5-minute protocol. And if you're in your 50s or beyond, and you've been relying on walking as your main form of exercise, I'd encourage you to have a conversation with your doctor about whether a resistance-based approach might serve you better. It certainly served me better. Now, I want to address something about sustainability because I think a lot of men hear about this protocol and they think, okay, it sounds good, but can I really do this every single day? The answer is yes, and here's why. Because the protocol is only 5 minutes, the barrier to entry is incredibly low. Unlike a 45-minute walk, which requires planning and time carving out of your day, a 5-minute resistance session can happen anywhere. You can do loaded step-ups in your garage, your kitchen, your living room. You can do single leg deadlift holds anywhere with some space. You can do loaded carries down a hallway. The carry can happen while you're doing chores. The tempo squats can happen in front of your television. The point is that the time requirement is so low that consistency becomes feasible. Over 3 years, I've missed maybe 6 days total. Not because of lack of will, but because it's such a small time commitment that it just becomes part of your routine. Like brushing your teeth. You do it. It's just what you do. The 5-minute workout is one piece of the puzzle. There are other things, obviously. Your nutrition, your recovery, your stress management. But in terms of what you do with your body 5 days a week, this protocol changed how I think about training. It's efficient, it's effective, it's sustainable. And at our age, sustainability beats intensity every single time. Subscribe to this channel because over the next few weeks, I'm going to break down each of these 5 movements in complete detail. I'm showing you the exact progression I used, the common mistakes I see men making, and how to troubleshoot the movements if something doesn't feel right. You're also going to want to know about the recovery protocol that makes this training sustainable, which I'm covering in the next video. That's where most men fail, by the way. They nail the training, but they skip the recovery piece, and then they wonder why they plateau or get hurt. See you in the next one.